The snow fell thick and merciless, swallowing the skeletal remains of the abandoned city. From rooftops scattered across the urban wasteland, enemy snipers fired with absolute precision, each bullet a calculated execution. The elite unit pinned down below could only watch as their numbers dwindled. Radio static filled the frozen air. The commander whispered into the dying transmission, "They can't be beaten." But then, a figure emerged through the blizzard. No insignia, no identity, just a rifle and death's silence. From that moment, everything began to change. The city had been dead for 3 months. Not metaphorically dead, actually dead. Every window shattered, every door hanging from rusted hinges. The population evacuated or buried under rubble that nobody bothered to clear. What remained was a skeleton of concrete and rebar, stripped bare by artillery and abandoned by both sides until it became useful again. Now, it was useful. Captain Daniel Reeves crouched behind a collapsed storefront, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The snowfall had started light that morning, but now came down in thick, suffocating curtains. Visibility. Maybe 30 meters on a good gust of wind. Maybe. This was supposed to be a simple recon, muttered Sergeant Hayes beside him, eyes scanning the gray void ahead. Nothing simple anymore, Daniel replied, his voice barely above a whisper. The city had been abandoned for months, a strategic no-man's land neither side wanted badly enough to hold. Until now. Intelligence suggested enemy supply routes ran through here. The mission: confirm, report, extract. Standard reconnaissance. The first shot shattered that assumption. Private Jensen dropped without a sound, a clean hole through his helmet. The crack of the rifle came a half-second later, swallowed almost immediately by the howling wind and snow. Contact! Sniper! Lieutenant Marcus Hayes threw himself behind a crumbling concrete barrier, his heart hammering against his ribs. Another shot. Corporal Davidson's radio exploded in a spray of electronics and blood. He collapsed, screaming, clutching his shattered shoulder. "Where the hell is it coming from?" someone shouted. Sergeant Rivera pressed himself against a wall, scanning the rooftops through the blizzard. "I can't see anything. Visibility's maybe 30 meters. Northeast, high ground," someone yelled. A third shot. Another soldier down. That came from the west. No, southwest. Different shooter. Commander Hayes crouched behind a rusted vehicle, his breath forming clouds in the freezing air. His team, 12 of the military's best, were pinned down in what should have been a simple reconnaissance mission through the abandoned industrial district. The intelligence briefing had mentioned possible hostile presence, but nothing like this. "Actual, this is Delta 7. We are taking effective fire from multiple positions, requesting immediate support." The transmission cut off mid-sentence. Hayes watched through his scope as another one of his soldiers dropped, a clean shot through the temple. No muzzle flash, no sound beyond the wind. "Contact lost with forward team," Lieutenant Morrison reported, his voice tight. "That's 3 down in 10 minutes. "Position?" Hayes demanded. "Unknown. Multiple shooters, elevated positions, probably rotating." Captain Hayes pressed himself against a collapsed concrete wall, ice crystals forming on his breath. The city stretched before them, a graveyard of buildings, each window a potential death sentence. His unit had walked into what should have been a straightforward reconnaissance mission. Instead, they'd stumbled into a killing field. "Sir, we need to pull back," Sergeant Rodriguez whispered beside him, her voice tight with fear. "We're sitting ducks out here." Before he could respond, another crack split the air. Private Chen dropped without a sound, a precise shot through the scope he'd been using to scan the rooftops. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered into the radio. Captain Davis felt his stomach turn. That made 6. 6 soldiers down in 2 hours, and they hadn't even seen the enemy. Not once. Just muzzle flashes in the blizzard, impossibly distant, impossibly accurate. "They're everywhere," Jensen muttered, pressed against a crumbling wall. "It's like they can see through the snow." Davis shook his head, trying to keep his voice steady. "No one's that good, but they were. Every movement drew fire. Every attempt to advance met with a bullet that found its mark with surgical precision. The enemy snipers worked in perfect coordination. A web of death stretched across the frozen city. Through his binoculars, Captain Morrison watched another of his soldiers fall. The shot had come from somewhere in the eastern sector, or had it been the north? The snow made everything a blur of white and gray. "They're playing with us," his lieutenant whispered beside him. Morrison didn't answer. He was watching the patterns. 3 confirmed kills in the last hour, each from a different direction. Each shot perfectly placed. No second attempts needed. His radio crackled. "Command, this is Raven 2. We've lost another spotter. We can't even see where they're..." Static. Then silence. Morrison pressed his fingers to his temples. 12 years of experience leading men through hell, and he'd never felt this helpless. His unit, supposedly elite, was being systematically dismantled by an enemy they couldn't even see. "Sir." Lieutenant Davies crawled up beside him, her face pale beneath the frost clinging to her helmet. "That's 4 down in 2 hours. They're not missing. Not once." Through the scope of his binoculars, Marcus scanned the skeletal remains of apartment blocks, their broken windows like empty eye sockets staring back. Somewhere in that maze of concrete and steel, the enemy waited. "Radio silence protocol," he ordered. "They're tracking our communications." The winter city of Volkgrad had been abandoned for 3 years, ever since the chemical plant incident forced an evacuation. Now it served as a hunting ground. Intelligence had mentioned resistance fighters in the area, maybe a few stragglers. Nobody had said anything about this. Private Jensen crouched beside him, her breath forming small clouds in the frozen air. "Sir, Morrison's squad hasn't checked in for 20 minutes. I know. That makes 7 casualties in 2 hours. We haven't even seen them." Commander William Shaw pressed his eye to his scope, scanning the skeletal remains of apartment buildings. Snow fell in thick curtains, turning the world into a confusion of white and gray. Somewhere in that maze of rubble and ice, the enemy waited. Not an army, not even a platoon, just women, just snipers. And they were destroying his unit piece by piece. "Status report," he said into the radio, keeping his voice steady even as his pulse hammered against his throat. Static crackled back. Then, "Harris is down. Clean headshot. We never saw the muzzle flash. Position? Unknown. Could be anywhere within a 300-meter radius." Marcus lowered the radio and pressed his back against the crumbling concrete wall. Around him, the remains of what had once been a factory district stretched into the white void of the snowstorm. Buildings stood like broken teeth against the gray sky, their windows empty and dark. They'd been pinned down for 6 hours. 6 hours since entering what intelligence had called minimal resistance territory. 6 hours since the first shot had dropped Lieutenant Hendricks mid-sentence, his words dying with him in the snow. Now, 12 soldiers remained of the original 23. They were scattered across 3 buildings, unable to advance, unable to retreat. Every attempt to move drew fire precise, calculated, lethal. Commander Sarah Holland pressed her back against the crumbling brick wall, her breath forming small clouds in the frozen air. The radio crackled with static and panicked whispers from the scattered units. "Sector 4. We've got eyes on movement." The transmission cut off. Another one down. "They're everywhere," whispered Martinez, the youngest of her squad, his hands shaking despite the thermal gloves. "How many are there?" Sarah shook her head. She'd been counting shots, tracking patterns. At least 6 distinct firing positions. Maybe more. Each one a ghost. "Stay quiet," she ordered. "They're listening." The enemy snipers, all women, according to intelligence, had turned the ruined city into a killing maze. They didn't just shoot, they orchestrated. One would fire to flush targets into another's line of sight. They used the wind, the snowfall, even the groans of collapsing buildings to mask their movements. Lieutenant Marcus Chen pressed against the frozen concrete beside her, his breath forming small clouds. "We've lost 8 already. Mitchell, Rodriguez, the new kid." "I know." Sarah's voice was flat. She'd commanded this unit for 3 years, never lost this many in a single day. Another shot cracked through the air. Someone screamed, cut short. "That's Williams," Chen whispered, his face pale. "Jesus Christ, that's Williams." Sarah closed her eyes briefly. 9. The mission brief had called this a routine sweep of an abandoned industrial sector. Find any remaining hostile forces, secure the perimeter, get out before nightfall. But someone had failed to mention that the city's ruins were home to what soldiers were already calling the Winter Ghosts, a cadre of elite female snipers who'd chosen this frozen hellscape as their hunting ground. She checked her watch. 3 hours until dark. 3 hours until they'd be completely blind. "Ma'am." Private Jensen crawled over, his young face streaked with grime and fear. "Radio's picking up something. Someone requesting our position." "Tell them to stay clear," Sarah said immediately. "This is a death trap." "It's just one person, ma'am. Already in the city." Sarah frowned. "What? Who authorized?" "No authorization code, no call sign, just coordinates and a request for enemy positions." Chen swore under his breath. "Great. Some cowboy looking to play hero." But Sarah felt something shift in the air, something that made the hairs on her neck stand up. Give them our last known enemy positions, she said slowly. Ma'am? All of them. Every location we've marked. Jensen hesitated, then complied. The radio crackled with static as he transmitted. 15 minutes passed. No response. Then, in the distance, a single shot. Different from the others. Quieter. Almost gentle. Sarah raised her binoculars, scanning the ruins. Nothing moved. Snow continued its endless descent. Another shot. Same direction. Did we just lose another one? Chen asked quietly. But Sarah was watching a rooftop, 3 buildings away, where their thermal imaging had detected an enemy sniper 2 hours ago. The heat signature was still there, but something was wrong. It hadn't moved. At all. They got one, she breathed. What? One of theirs. Someone just took out one of their snipers. Chen stared at her. That's impossible. They're too good, too coordinated. They'd see anyone coming from. A third shot. Then a fourth. Sarah's radio crackled to life. A woman's voice, calm and cold. I count 7 total. Give me 20 minutes. The transmission ended before Sarah could respond. Who the hell was that? Chen demanded. Sarah didn't answer. She was watching the city, watching as the predators suddenly became prey. The winter ghosts had owned this battlefield for months. No unit had managed to dislodge them. Most didn't survive trying. But now, moving through the snow-blind ruins, was someone they hadn't anticipated. Someone who understood their game. Someone who could play it better. Ma'am? Jensen's voice was small. Should we do something? Sarah thought about her 9 dead soldiers, about the fear in her remaining troops' eyes, about the arrogance in the mission brief that had sent them into this meat grinder. We wait, she said finally, and we watch. The temperature dropped as afternoon gave way to twilight. The snow fell harder, reducing visibility to mere meters. Perfect conditions for the enemy snipers, Sarah had thought, but she was wrong. Perfect conditions for whoever had just entered the game. Another shot echoed through the ruins. Then silence. Then another. And for the first time since entering this frozen hell, Sarah felt something she hadn't expected to feel again today. Hope. Before the mysterious sniper arrived, the winter ghosts had been perfect. Perfect in their coordination, perfect in their patience, perfect in their lethality. Corporal David Morrison had watched them work for 2 hours before he died. He'd been designated spotter for Lieutenant Sarah's advance team, positioned in what seemed like solid cover behind a collapsed wall. He'd marked 3 enemy positions, careful to keep his scope's lens hooded against reflection. It hadn't mattered. The bullet had come from a 4th position he'd never seen. It had entered through a gap in the concrete he'd considered too small to be a firing line. The shot had been calculated for wind, distance, the slight tilt of his helmet. He'd died before he understood he'd been outplayed. That was how they operated, like a machine with human intuition. Sergeant Rachel Kim had survived the longest of Sarah's forward scouts. She'd been smart, paranoid, never staying in one position for more than 90 seconds. She'd used smoke, mirrors, even a decoy helmet on a stick, an old trick. But it worked. Until it didn't. The enemy snipers had watched her pattern, let her think she was clever. Then, when she'd finally committed to crossing a 20-foot gap between buildings, 3 shots had rung out simultaneously. One had hit her decoy. One had hit where she would have been if she'd dodged left. The third had hit where she actually went, right, into what should have been safety. The winter ghosts didn't just predict movement. They predicted the prediction of movement. Now, huddled in their increasingly desperate positions, Sarah's surviving troops were learning what it meant to be hunted by something smarter than fear. They're talking to each other, Chen said quietly, pressing his helmet radio closer. I can hear them. Some kind of coded language. Can you translate? Don't need to. His face was grim. One whistles, another clicks, a third taps on metal. It's not about words. It's about rhythm. They're triangulating us by sound. Sarah felt her stomach drop. Every breath, every movement, every whisper. They were painting a map for the enemy. We could go silent, Private Jensen suggested. Complete radio discipline, no movement. Then we freeze to death. Chen cut in. Temperature's dropping fast. We need to keep moving or we'll die right here. Sarah knew he was right. The enemy had engineered this perfectly. A maze where movement meant death and stillness meant a slower death. They were being winnowed down by cold and fear until desperation made them sloppy. Then the killing would be easy. She'd read about psychological warfare tactics. This was textbook, but executed with such precision it seemed almost artistic. The enemy snipers weren't just eliminating targets. They were conducting an experiment in human breaking points. Ma'am. Jensen's voice trembled. Permission to. I mean, if we're going to die anyway, shouldn't we at least try to? No heroics, Sarah said firmly. That's what they want. Someone to panic and run. Then they can pick us off in the open. But she could see it in her soldier's eyes. The thought creeping in. What if running gives us better odds than waiting? Another shot cracked through the air. Somewhere to their left, someone gasped. Then nothing. 10 dead. They're hurting us, Sarah realized aloud. Each shot pushes us toward what? Chen checked his tactical map. His face went pale. The factory. That big munitions plant at the city center. It's the only place with enough cover for all of us. It's a kill box. Yes, ma'am. Sarah's hands clenched. The enemy had spent hours not just killing her soldiers but positioning the survivors, like chess pieces being moved into checkmate. She grabbed the radio. Unknown sniper, do you copy? If you're real, we need help now. Static. Then that cold, calm voice. I know. Stay where you are. They're expecting you to move. How do you? Because that's what I would do. The transmission ended. Sarah and Chen exchanged looks. Who is she? Chen whispered. Sarah had no answer. But as another distant shot rang out, different from the enemy's weapons, surgical and final, she began to suspect someone who knew this game because she'd invented it. By the 4th hour, Lieutenant Sarah's unit had stopped being soldiers and become survivors. The transformation was almost visible, the way Private Jensen flinched at every sound, the way Chen checked his weapon compulsively, as if the rifle could protect him from invisible death, the way no one met anyone else's eyes, because seeing your own fear reflected back was unbearable. I heard they're not even human, Jensen whispered, his voice cracking. The winter ghosts. I heard they were part of some program. Enhanced. That's why they never miss. Shut up, Chen hissed, but there was no conviction in it. Rodriguez said before he died that he saw one. Said she was smiling, just standing there in the snow, smiling while I said, shut up. Sarah wanted to intervene, restore discipline. But what was the point? Discipline required belief in survival. Her soldiers had stopped believing 3 hours ago. The stories had started after the first week the winter ghosts appeared. Wild tales spread by survivors, or more accurately, by the few souls who'd glimpsed the enemy and lived to talk about it. They said the snipers moved like shadows, that they could shoot through walls, that they never slept. Some claimed they were defectors from an elite program gone wrong. Others insisted they were local women whose families had been killed, transformed by grief into something beyond human. The truth was probably simpler and somehow worse. They were just extraordinarily well-trained, and they'd chosen terrain they knew intimately. But when you were pinned down, watching your friends die from bullets that seemed to come from nowhere, the human mind needed explanations. It needed monsters. Because monsters could be killed, ghosts were forever. My brother's unit came through here last month, Corporal Lisa Warren said suddenly. She'd been silent for hours. 15 soldiers went in. 3 came out. Warren, Sarah started. He was one of the 3. You know what he told me? He said the worst part wasn't the shooting. It was the waiting. Knowing they were watching you, deciding when you'd die. He said it was like being studied. That's psychological warfare, Chen said, trying to sound rational. They want us afraid. Fear makes us sloppy. Is it working? Warren's laugh was hollow. Because I'm terrified. Sarah couldn't argue. She'd commanded troops in 3 combat zones over 7 years. She'd seen soldiers hold positions against overwhelming odds, had witnessed courage that defied logic. But this was different. This was the fear of being hunted by something smarter than you, something that could wait, something that enjoyed the waiting. We need evac, Jensen said abruptly. Ma'am, please, call for evac. Helicopter, drone strike, something, anything. In this weather, with 0 visibility, Chen shook his head. They'd never find us. And even if they did, those snipers would hear the engines coming from miles away. We'd be sitting ducks. We're already sitting ducks. At least here we have cover. What cover? They've killed 10 of us. Through walls, through smoke, through everything. There is no cover. Enough. Sarah's voice cut through the panic. Quiet, but absolute. We are not breaking. Not now. Ma'am. I said enough. She met each soldier's eyes in turn. That unknown sniper is out there. She's taking them down. We just need to hold position until... A shot rang out. Close. Too close. Sarah's radio crackled. Don't move. One of them relocated to your building. 3rd floor, northeast corner. Sarah's blood went cold. That was directly above them. "She knows we're here," Warren breathed. "Yes," the radio voice answered, though Warren hadn't transmitted. "But she doesn't know I'm behind her." Silence. Then, from above, the sound of a body hitting the floor. 11 down, the voice said calmly. 4 to go. Sarah's soldiers stared at the ceiling, then at each other. For the first time in hours, Jensen smiled. It was a terrible smile, equal parts relief and hysteria. "She's actually doing it," he whispered. "She's actually killing them." But Sarah wasn't smiling, because she'd recognized something in that calm, cold voice on the radio. The same tone the winter ghosts had probably used with each other. The same detachment, the same certainty. Whatever was hunting the hunters, it wasn't mercy wearing human skin. It was something just as terrifying, just pointed in their direction for now. The radio had gone silent for 12 minutes. 12 minutes, where Sarah's unit didn't know if their mysterious savior was alive, dead, or simply toying with them. 12 minutes where every soldier held their breath, waiting for either salvation or the next gunshot. Then, footsteps. Soft, measured, crunching through snow. Chen raised his weapon instantly, aiming at the doorway of their makeshift shelter. Jensen scrambled backward. Warren whispered something that might have been a prayer. The figure that appeared in the doorframe didn't look like salvation. She was average height, dressed in winter camouflage that had seen real use. Worn at the knees and elbows, stained with old blood and newer mud. No unit insignia, no name tape. Her face was partially obscured by a tactical scarf, but her eyes were visible. Pale gray, unnervingly calm, scanning the room with the efficiency of someone counting inventory. A rifle hung across her back, a sidearm at her hip, and in her right hand, casually, was a knife with a dark blade. "Lieutenant Sarah Anderson?" Her voice matched the radio transmission, flat, controlled, almost gentle in its lack of emotion. "That's me." Sarah stood slowly, keeping her hands visible. "Who are you? Does it matter?" "To me, yes." The woman's eyes, and Sarah couldn't help thinking they were a predator's eyes, the kind that saw you as data rather than person, fixed on her. For a moment, Sarah understood what the enemy must have felt, being assessed, measured, found wanting, or sufficient. "You can call me Gray," the woman said finally. "That's not a name." "No." She moved past them to the window, checking the sight lines with practiced ease. "But it's what you'll use." Chen hadn't lowered his weapon. "How did you get past them? The ghosts?" "I didn't." Gray's attention remained on the window. "They're still out there. 3 left." "Your radio said 4, Sarah pointed out. "One got impatient. Tried to relocate after I took her partner. It was a mistake." The casual way she said it, a mistake, as if discussing a chess move rather than killing someone, made Sarah's skin crawl. "Who sent you?" she pressed. "No one sent me." "So you're what, freelance? A mercenary?" "I'm someone who was in the area." Gray finally turned from the window. "Your distress call went out on an open channel. Sloppy operational security, by the way." Sarah's jaw tightened. "We were desperate." "Desperation makes you vulnerable." Gray gestured to the dead radio on the floor. The ghosts were listening too. They knew rescue would bring more targets. They were waiting. "But you weren't rescue." "No." Something flickered across Gray's expression, too quick to identify. "I was something else." Jensen found his voice. Can you get us out?" "Eventually." "Eventually? What does that mean?" "It means I still have work to do." Gray pulled a tablet from her jacket, showing them a building schematic marked with red dots. "The remaining 3 are here, here, and here. They know I'm hunting them now. They've changed tactics." "Meaning?" Chen asked. "Meaning they've stopped hunting you and started hunting me." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. "Is that a problem?" "For them, yes." Gray pocketed the tablet. "But it changes the timing. I need you to stay here. Don't move. Don't transmit. 1 hour." "An hour?" Warren's voice rose. "We're supposed to just sit here while I finish what you couldn't." The words hung in the frozen air, brutal in their honesty. Chen bristled. "We had no intel on their positions, their tactics. You had everything you needed." Gray's gaze swept over them. "You just weren't trained to see it. The snow patterns, the thermal voids, the way certain buildings lean. They all told you where the ghosts were positioned." "Then why didn't you just tell us?" Sarah demanded. "Would you have believed me?" Gray moved toward the door. "Besides, you were the bait. I needed them confident." Sarah's blood went cold. "You used us." "I used the situation. Gray paused at the threshold. If I'd intervened earlier, the ghosts would have scattered, stayed hidden for weeks. Your unit would have been pulled out, the area declared too hot, and they'd have killed the next unit and the next one after that. So you let my soldiers die. 3 of them died after I arrived. Gray's voice remained level. 7 more were already gone. I minimized casualties within the tactical parameters. They weren't parameters. Sarah's voice shook with rage. They were people. My people. For the first time, Gray's expression shifted. Not to sympathy exactly, but to something that might have been understanding. Yes, she said quietly. They were. And the only way to make their deaths mean something is to ensure the ghosts never do this again. And you're certain you can? Gray checked her rifle with movements so smooth they seemed reflexive. I've done it before. When? But Gray was already gone, melting into the snow-blind ruins as if she'd never been there at all. Chen lowered his weapon slowly. What the hell was that? That, Sarah said, staring at where Gray had disappeared, was someone more dangerous than the people trying to kill us. Jensen looked like he might be sick. Are we sure she's on our side? Sarah didn't answer, because she wasn't sure. She wasn't sure of anything except that Gray moved like the ghosts, thought like the ghosts, and most disturbingly of all, killed like them. The only difference was which direction she was pointing. For now, Gray moved through the ruins like winter itself, silent, inevitable, uncaring. She'd spent 17 minutes studying the building layouts from her initial vantage point. Another 8 observing patterns, the interval between shots, the coordination signals, the slight variations in bullet trajectory that told her about wind conditions and rifle specifications. By the time she'd taken her first shot, she'd known more about her opponents than they knew about themselves. The first ghost had died without understanding what happened. One moment she'd been tracking Lieutenant Sarah's unit. The next, darkness. Gray's bullet had punched through a gap in a concrete pillar the sniper had considered solid cover. The second had been smarter. She'd recognized the threat, adjusted her position, but she'd made the mistake of following a predictable urban combat doctrine, relocating to what tactical manuals called a superior vantage point. Gray didn't use manuals. She used psychology. The sniper had moved exactly where Gray had been waiting. Now, with 3 ghosts remaining, the game had changed. They knew they were being hunted. They'd abandoned their coordinated pattern and gone to ground, each taking defensive positions designed for siege situations. They'd stopped being predators and become prey trying to survive. It was the correct tactical decision. It wouldn't save them. Gray scaled a partially collapsed apartment building, using exposed rebar as handholds. The temperature had dropped another 5 degrees. Good. The colder it got, the more thermal signatures stood out. The remaining ghosts would be forced to choose between staying warm and staying invisible. At the 7th floor, she paused. Listened. Most soldiers listened for sounds. Footsteps, breathing, weapon clicks. Gray listened for absences. The way wind stopped moving through certain windows. The lack of settling sounds in buildings where pigeons should be roosting. There. A thermal dead spot in a building 300 meters northeast. Too uniform to be natural. One of them was hiding there, probably wrapped in thermal defeating materials. Smart, but not smart enough. Because Gray wasn't tracking heat signatures. She was tracking the absence of them. The void where a human-sized space had disrupted the ambient temperature patterns. She ranged the distance, compensated for wind. The shot would have to punch through glass and 2 layers of insulation. She exhaled halfway. Held. The rifle kicked gently against her shoulder. 300 meters away, the thermal void collapsed. A body slumped into the visible spectrum. 12, Gray murmured to herself. Her radio crackled. One of the remaining ghosts, breaking silence in desperation. Who are you? Gray didn't respond. Communication was advantage, and she gave no advantages. But the ghost continued, her voice tight with controlled fear. You're not military. Not anymore. I can tell. The way you move. The way you think. You were one of us, weren't you? Gray's finger hovered over the transmit button. Then she clicked it once. Just once. A short burst of static. Acknowledgement. Nothing more. The ghost laughed, but there was no humor in it. They erased you, didn't they? Whatever unit, whatever program. You got too good, too dangerous. So they buried your records and pretended you never existed. Gray scanned the ruins methodically. The voice had come from southeast. But it was too clear, too direct. A relay. The ghost was nowhere near her radio transmitter. Here's what I don't understand, the ghost continued. Why come back? Why fight for people who erased you? Another click of Gray's transmit button. 2 bursts this time. Ah, not for them. For something else. A pause. Or maybe you just need to kill us because we're the only ones left who fight like you do. Gray found the relay transmitter, a small device tucked into a window frame. She traced the probable signal path, calculating likely secondary positions. The shot came from an impossible angle. Gray dropped flat as the bullet screamed past where her head had been a half-second before. The round hit concrete behind her, spraying frozen fragments. She rolled, came up in a different position, scanned frantically. There, muzzle flash from a building she'd already cleared. The ghost had doubled back somehow, anticipated Gray's route, set a trap. For the first time since arriving, Gray smiled. Not pleasure, recognition. Good, she whispered to herself. The last 2 ghosts weren't just running anymore. They were adapting, learning her patterns the way she'd learned theirs. It made them dangerous. It also made them predictable, because Gray knew what she would do in their position, and she knew it wouldn't be enough. She moved again, a shadow among shadows, leaving the relay transmitter untouched. Let them think she didn't know it was bait. The real trap was somewhere else, and she was about to spring it. The next 17 minutes became a deadly dance, where distance meant nothing, and time meant everything. The ghost who'd nearly killed Gray was named Katya, though Gray wouldn't learn this name until much later, from debriefing reports she'd never officially read. All Gray knew now was that Katya was using her techniques. False trails, misdirection, exploiting assumptions. It was like fighting a mirror. Katya fired from position A, then relocated to position C, skipping B entirely. She used sound as a weapon, clicking metal at intervals that mimicked reload patterns but were actually distance markers. She was turning Gray's own tools against her. Gray approved, in an abstract way. Approval didn't stop her from hunting. She moved through a collapsed department store, boots crunching on broken glass. Normally, silence was paramount, but now she was making noise deliberately, creating data. Katya would hear it, track it, make decisions based on it. Those decisions would be mistakes. Gray planted her radio on a mannequin near a window, kept moving, circled back through the subfloor level where frozen pipes created acoustic dead zones. 30 seconds later, a bullet shattered the window near the mannequin. The radio exploded in a burst of plastic and circuitry. Gray was already 2 buildings over, watching the muzzle flash location through her scope. But Katya wasn't there, just another relay. The shot had been fired remotely, triggered by tripwire. Very good, Gray murmured. She marked the location, extrapolated likely firing positions based on the cable angle, environmental cover, escape routes, motion. Far side of the ruins, building 6 Alpha, a shape moving too deliberately to be debris. Gray adjusted her aim, compensated for the extreme distance. Nearly 400 meters, with crosswind and falling snow. At this range, with these conditions, even Olympic shooters would struggle. She fired. The shape dropped, but Gray was already moving, because something felt wrong. The silhouette had moved too slowly, too obviously, almost like the building behind her exploded in a shower of concrete as a round punched through where she'd been standing 3 seconds earlier. Gray hit the ground, rolled, came up scanning. The shot had come from Building 9 Charlie, but that was impossible. She'd cleared 9 Charlie 15 minutes ago, had visual confirmation of empty rooms, unless the ghost had been there all along, hidden so perfectly that even Gray's trained eye had missed her. Gray's mind raced through tactical scenarios, or there were 2 shooters working in coordination again, one as bait, one as trigger. The decoy movement at Building 6 Alpha had been intentional, designed to make Gray reveal her position. She'd fallen for it. For the first time since arriving, Gray felt something cold settle in her stomach. Not fear exactly. Respect. And respect was dangerous because it made you hesitate. Her radio, her spare, the one she kept hidden, crackled with that same ghost's voice. I counted your breathing pattern, calculated your heart rate from your shot intervals. You're good, but you're still human, and humans have limits. Gray didn't respond. She was already moving through the building's lower floor, using support pillars for cover. My partner's name was Elena, the ghost continued. You killed her at 0347 hours. She was 26 years old. She played violin, psychological warfare, humanizing the target, making Gray see her victims as people. It wouldn't work. Gray had stopped seeing people as anything but tactical elements years ago. It was how she'd survived, how she'd become what she was. But something in her chest tightened anyway, just for a moment. She crushed the feeling immediately. Feelings made you slow. Gray climbed to the third floor, moving with spider-like precision on debris that would have betrayed most people with every step. She reached a window with sightlines to Building 9 Charlie. Empty, as she'd known it would be. The ghost had fired and relocated. By now she'd be... Where? Gray closed her eyes. Visualized the terrain, the wind patterns, the time elapsed, the escape routes, the psychology of someone who'd just successfully baited their hunter. She opened her eyes, turned 90 degrees from where logic said the ghost should be, and fired into a building that had been cleared 30 minutes ago. A scream cut short. Then, silence. 13, Gray said quietly. 1 left. The shot should have been perfect. Gray had calculated everything. Distance, wind speed, the trajectory arc. Her rifle was zeroed, her breathing controlled. The conditions, while challenging, were within operational parameters. The bullet punched through 3 centimeters of insulated wall, passed through the space where the ghost's center mass should have been, and hit nothing. Because the ghost had moved exactly when Gray pulled the trigger. Not before, when the scope's glint might have warned her. Not after, when reaction time would have been too slow. Exactly when? Impossible. Unless... The building beneath Gray erupted. Not an explosion, but a collapse. Structural failure triggered by carefully placed charges. The floor tilted violently as support beams gave way. Gray was already diving through a window as the room disintegrated behind her. She hit a snowbank 3 stories down, rolled to disperse the impact, came up with her rifle raised. The shot grazed her shoulder. Not a kill shot, but close enough that she felt the heat of the round passing. Her left arm went numb. Gray dropped flat behind a concrete barrier, breathing hard. Blood soaked her jacket sleeve, steaming in the cold air. The last ghost hadn't just survived, she'd planned. Gray checked her arm clinically. Through and through, missed the bone. Painful, debilitating, but manageable. She tore fabric from her undershirt, packed the wound, kept moving, because stopping meant dying. Her radio crackled. You're injured. I can tell by the way you're moving. Favoring your right side. Breathing's elevated. Gray stayed silent, but her mind raced. The ghost was close enough to observe her, close enough to see details, which meant Gray could see her too, if she knew where to look. My name is Sonia, the ghost said. I thought you should know, since you're about to kill me. Or I'm about to kill you. Seems polite. Gray wrapped her wounded arm, her right hand never leaving her rifle. The pain was a distant thing, locked behind mental walls she'd built over years of conditioning. The girls you killed? We weren't monsters, Sonia continued. We were soldiers, like you once were, before they made you into whatever you are now. For the first time, Gray spoke. I know. Silence on the radio. Then, you think I don't recognize what you are? What you were trained to be? Gray's voice was flat. I helped design the program. The admission hung in the frozen air. That's not possible, Sonia said finally. The program was disbanded 6 years ago. Everyone involved was erased. Yes. Gray moved through the ruins, each step calculated. I was thorough. Had to be. The program created something too dangerous to exist. Then why are you still here? Someone had to be. Gray saw it then, a reflection in broken glass. Too perfect, too positioned. Sonia had left it deliberately, a lure to draw Gray into a kill zone. Gray ignored it, moved perpendicular, using angles Sonia wouldn't expect. You talk about us like we're weapons, Sonia said, and now there was heat in her voice. Like we're not human. You're not. Gray reached a vantage point. Neither am I. That's why I'm the only one who can stop you. We never hurt civilians. Only military targets. You killed 9 of Lieutenant Anderson's soldiers. They were kids, barely trained. They were invading our territory. There is no our territory. Not anymore. There's just soldiers following orders and killers making excuses. Gray saw the muzzle flash before she heard the shot. She was already moving, returning fire in the same motion. 2 shots. Simultaneous. Gray felt the impact in her side. Sonia's round had found her, but Gray's round had found Sonia too. They both went down. Gray counted to 10 before moving. Standard counter-sniper protocol. Don't check your target immediately. Assume they're still dangerous. Assume they're waiting for you to break cover. At 7, she heard Sonia coughing. The wet, horrible sound of punctured lungs. At 10, Gray forced herself upright. Her side screamed protest. The round had caught her below the ribs, probably cracked bone, definitely caused internal bleeding. She had maybe an hour before shock set in. Plenty of time. She stumbled across the snow-covered ground, rifle raised, until she found Sonia collapsed behind a shattered wall. The ghost was younger than Gray expected. Mid-20s, with dark hair matted by blood and snow. Her rifle lay 3 feet away, too far to reach. Her hand still stretched toward it anyway. "Don't," Gray said quietly. Sonia's hand stopped. She looked up at Gray with eyes that were already losing focus. "You got me center mass." "How?" "I timed it perfectly. The moment you fired, I was moving. You timed it perfectly for where you thought I was aiming." Gray lowered her rifle slightly. "I aimed for where you'd move to." Understanding flickered across Sonia's face. Then something like respect. "You predicted my prediction." "It's what I was trained to do." Sonia coughed again. More blood. "She didn't have long. The program. You really designed it?" Gray nodded. "Then this is your fault. Elena, Katya, Vera, all of them. We were normal soldiers before. The program made us into exactly what you were supposed to be," Gray interrupted. "Enhanced tactical thinking, pattern recognition, psychological conditioning. You were perfect. Too perfect. That's why they shut it down." "No." Gray knelt beside the dying woman. "They shut it down because I requested it." Sonia stared at her. "You? Why?" "Because I saw what we'd created. Soldiers who could outthink any opponent, who could coordinate like a hive mind, who could turn any terrain into a killing field." Gray's voice was hollow. "We made something unstoppable. And when the war ended, what were you all supposed to do? Go back to normal life?" "Some of us tried, and failed. Because there is no normal after what we did to you." Gray checked Sonia's wound clinically. "Fatal. 3 minutes, maybe 4. So you came here, found each other, decided if you couldn't be soldiers, you'd be something else. We protected this territory, kept worse things out, by killing everyone who entered, by sending a message." Sonia's breath rattled. "No one bothers ghosts." Gray was quiet for a moment. Then, "I'm sorry. For killing me? For creating you." Sonia laughed, but it turned into a coughing fit. When she recovered, her voice was weaker. "The others. Elena had a sister. Katya was engaged. Vera wanted to open a bakery. Can you believe that? A bakery. I believe it. Will you? Will you tell someone? So they know we weren't monsters?" Gray thought about Lieutenant Anderson's 9 dead soldiers, about the fear in the survivors' eyes, about the reports that would be filed, the medals that would be awarded posthumously. "No," she said honestly. "I'm going to erase every trace of you. The program, your records, everything. It's the only way to make sure no one tries to recreate what we did." Sonia's eyes filled with tears. "So we'll be nothing, like we never existed. You'll be a story, a warning." Gray stood, ignoring the pain in her side. "That's the best I can offer. It's not enough. It never is." Gray walked away as Sonia's breathing became shallower. She didn't look back. Looking back was a luxury she'd given up years ago. Behind her, the last ghost died alone in the snow. Gray marked the location mentally. She'd send a recovery team later, anonymously. The bodies deserved that much. But the names, the records, the truth of what they'd been, that died with her. She activated her radio. "Lieutenant Anderson, the threat is neutralized. You're clear to move out." Sarah's voice came back immediately. "What about you? I'm not part of your report. Like hell. You saved our lives. You deserve—" "I deserve nothing," Gray cut in. "File your report. Ambush by unknown hostiles, all eliminated by coordinated unit action. No one else was here." "That's not what happened." "It's what happened." Gray's voice hardened. "Trust me, Lieutenant. You don't want me in your report. You don't want questions about who I am or how I found you. Some secrets protect everyone." Silence. Then, "Will we see you again?" Gray looked at the ruins one last time. At the blood in the snow. At the ghosts she'd created and destroyed. "No," she said. "You won't." She ended the transmission. 14 kills. A record, even for her. She felt nothing about it. That was the worst part. The snow stopped falling at 05, 2, 3 hours. Lieutenant Sarah stood in the ruins, watching the first gray light of dawn break over broken buildings. Around her, the surviving members of her unit moved like zombies, exhausted, traumatized, but alive. "Casualty report," she said automatically, though she already knew the numbers. Chen's voice was hoarse. 9, confirmed Kia. 7 WIA, 3 critical. We need immediate medevac. Already called it in. Helicopters are en route. Sarah looked at the coordinates where Gray had last transmitted from. Nothing but snow and shadows. Any sign of our ally? No, ma'am. It's like she was never here. Jensen approached, carrying something. Ma'am, I found this. He held out a rifle magazine, different caliber from ours. And there's these. He showed her shell casings, also mismatched to unit weapons. Physical evidence, proof that someone else had been here. Sarah took them, felt their weight. Then, deliberately, she dropped them in the snow. What was that, Private? Jensen blinked. Ma'am? I said. What was that? I don't see anything. Understanding slowly dawned on Jensen's young face. He glanced at Chen, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Nothing, ma'am, Jensen said carefully. I didn't find anything. Good. Sarah's radio crackled with the incoming medevac's arrival signal. Because when we file this report, it's going to be clear and simple. Our unit was ambushed by hostile forces. We held position, took casualties, and eventually overcame the threat through coordinated defensive action. But that's exactly what happened, Sarah said firmly. We had no outside assistance. No unauthorized personnel were in the area. Is that understood? Her remaining soldiers looked at each other. Then, one by one, they nodded. Understood, ma'am. The helicopters arrived 30 minutes later. As medics loaded the wounded, Sarah walked the perimeter one last time. The sun was fully up now, revealing the scope of the battle: craters, blood trails, shattered buildings, and 13 bodies. The enemy snipers, each killed with single shots of remarkable precision. She marked their locations for recovery teams. Anonymous hostiles. No names, no histories, just casualties in an unnamed war. As her helicopter lifted off, Sarah looked down at the frozen city. Somewhere in those ruins, Gray was either dead or disappeared. Either way, she was gone. Ma'am? Chen sat beside her, medical gauze wrapped around his arm. You think she'll be okay? Whoever she was? Sarah thought about the cold voice on the radio. The perfect shots. The way Gray had moved like winter itself. Beautiful and deadly and utterly without mercy. I think she's exactly what she needs to be, Sarah said finally, which is alone. The city receded behind them, swallowed by snow and distance. By evening, cleanup crews would arrive. By tomorrow, the official reports would be filed. By next week, the battle would be reduced to numbers in a database. And Gray would become what she'd always been, a ghost story, a rumor, the thing that haunted the edges of military legend. The sniper who appeared from nowhere, who saved an entire unit, who vanished without trace. Sarah knew soldiers would tell the story in bars and bunks, embellishing details until it became myth. The mysterious woman who killed 14 enemy snipers in one night. Some would claim she was a special forces operator. Others would insist she was a CIA ghost. A few would suggest she wasn't human at all. None would know the truth. Because the truth, that someone had been so thoroughly erased that even her heroism had to remain secret, was too sad to bear. Ma'am, Jensen called from across the helicopter. What do we tell the families, of the ones we lost? Sarah closed her eyes. 9 soldiers dead. 9 families who'd never know their children died because of a training program gone wrong. Because the military had created weapons it couldn't control. We tell them their soldiers died with honor, she said, fighting an enemy that was defeated, that their sacrifice mattered. Did it? Sarah opened her eyes, looked at her surviving troops. Kids, mostly. Scared and scarred, but alive. Yes, she said, it did. Because 14 ghosts would never hunt again. And sometimes, that was enough. The helicopter carried them away from the frozen city. Behind them, the sun climbed higher, burning away shadows. But some shadows, Sarah knew, never truly disappeared. They just waited for the next snowfall. 3 weeks later, the official report was filed and classified. Mission: Operation Frozen Reach. Location: redacted. Result: objective secured. 9 Kia, 7 WIA. Enemy forces neutralized. No mention of the winter ghosts, no mention of Gray. Just numbers and coordinates and the clinical language of military bureaucracy. But in the quiet spaces between official records, the story lived. In a bar outside Fort Bragg, a soldier told his friend about his sister's unit. How they'd been pinned down by impossible snipers. How everyone should have died. How someone appeared from nowhere and ended the threat. Who was she? The friend asked. No one knows. But they say she moved like smoke. Like she wasn't even real. In a Pentagon office, a colonel read through after-action reports and frowned at discrepancies. Shell casings that didn't match unit weapons. Ballistic patterns suggesting a single shooter, taking out multiple targets in conditions that should have made accurate shooting impossible. He made a note to investigate. 3 hours later, the note was deleted by someone with higher clearance. No explanation given. In a hospital room, Private Jensen woke from a nightmare about snow and gunfire. The nurse asked if he was okay. He started to tell her about the woman who saved them, then stopped. Some truths sounded crazy when spoken aloud, so he said nothing, but he never forgot. And in a small apartment in a city that no longer appeared on any map, a woman with gray eyes cleaned a rifle with methodical precision. Her shoulder was healing. Her ribs were taped. She'd survived, as she always did. On her table lay a file. 14 names, 14 women who'd once been soldiers, then became ghosts, then became nothing. Gray memorized each name. It was the least she could do. Then she burned the file. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. New situation. Interested? Gray deleted it without responding. But 3 days later, she was on a plane to another frozen city. Another impossible situation. Another group of soldiers who needed someone like her. Because there would always be ghosts. And ghosts needed other ghosts to stop them. Years passed. The story of the winter ghosts became legend, then myth, then forgotten by all but a few. Lieutenant Sarah became Captain Anderson, then Major Anderson. She never talked about that mission, but sometimes, late at night, she wondered, was Gray still out there? Still fighting battles no one would remember? Still saving lives no one would credit her for? Or had she finally stopped? Found peace? Or something like it? Sarah would never know. But on cold winter nights, when snow fell heavy and silent, she'd look out her window and think, somewhere, someone is hunting, and somewhere else, someone is being saved. And that was enough. Because some heroes don't need names. Some legends don't need proof. They just need to be true. And in the frozen ruins of abandoned cities, in the spaces between official records, in the stories soldiers tell when they think no one's listening, she was true. The sniper with no name. The ghost who hunted ghosts. The woman who appeared when death seemed certain and vanished when survival was assured. Gray. Not a person. Not a soldier. A force of nature. Unstoppable. Unnamed. Eternal.